my name's Anshika, and welcome to episode 2 of The Unseen Pillars, a podcast dedicated to shining a light on the heroes behind the scenes of chronic illness and disease. If you haven't already listened, I really recommend going back and listening to episode 1 before we begin, just so that you can hear our mission statement and why we're here. Now, I know it's been a bit, but I'm very excited to be back, and I'm very excited to keep this project going. Today, we are joined by a very special guest who is going to help us better our understanding of what mental health is, some common misconceptions, and how this affects both patients and caregivers. I'm so excited for this journey to continue, so let's get into it. So, first off, I would like to give a very warm welcome to this episode's mental health expert, Miss Anusha Atmakuri, who is a licensed professional counselor who works with mental health and in this field every single day. So, yeah, thank you so much for joining me, Miss Anusha.
Thank you for having me, Anshu.
Yeah, is there anything you'd like to share before we get started with this?
Yeah, sure. I would just like to share in general, mental health is very important. So I'm really, really excited that we've got another wonderful podcast, particularly, in the niche that you're doing this in. I'm thinking about it from, your wonderful name, Unseen Pillars, right? Like the pillars that uphold people who struggle and typically they are very unseen, and the importance and emphasis on how mental health is important for them too. So I'm really excited about your project and I can't wait to see what comes of it.
Thank you. I'm really excited to have you on my show. I think it's really important for experts and professionals in this field to really have a grasp on these kinds of topics. And so I'm gonna begin with, I wanted to start off this episode with our most basic question, like our underlying, like our umbrella question. So I wanted to start off with asking you, so how would you define mental health in a broad aspect? Like, what's your general definition of the topic?
Yeah, it's a great place to start. I love to start with definitions when in doubt.
Yeah.
So mental health is kind of like its name, right? It's our health that relates to our mental state. So what does that really mean? Essentially, it's like how we think, feel, and interact with the world around us. It's about emotional balance. It's about how we cope with stress, how we manage relationships, and even how we might find meaning in life.
So yeah, there's like a lot to it, right? It's never just one thing. It's different for everyone, right?
Exactly. But the
So
idea is kind of like physical health. Mental health is just health in all its vast forms as it relates to our mental state.
yeah. So I actually wanted to compare this. This was the broad answer, right? The broad overview of what mental health is. And I
Mhm.
wanted to kind of connect it to like these other people who don't really have this broad understanding or even like a general understanding in general. So I just wanted to know how would you describe mental health to someone who doesn't necessarily see mental health as the number one priority in their life? Cuz I know many people, like everyone lives their own lives and mental health affects everyone differently. So
Mhm.
how would you describe it to someone who doesn't necessarily see it as something that's on the top of their list?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I would say first, it's important to emphasize that it is essential because it affects everything that we do. It affects our work, our relationships, how we handle challenges. It even impacts our physical health. So when we're really taking care of our mental health, we're more resilient, productive, and just better equipped to enjoy life. And that's the key emphasis here too that I want to highlight is the importance of mental health as we find physical health important. It's the same thing, right? We all have mental health. We all have physical health. It's just another part of our health that needs regular care and attention. And that can look like therapy, that can look like just self care strategies, that can look like building emotional intelligence, emotional regulation skills. It can look like a lot of different things, but it certainly is a priority for anyone who wants to live a healthy lifestyle, just like physical health is a priority.
So yeah, definitely. It's even if it's like not your number one priority, it should be up there because it's just like it goes along with all your other types of things. Like so if you're exercising a lot to keep yourself in shape, you also have to like keep your mind in shape. This goes for athletes, this goes for anyone, all adults, kids, everyone, right? So
Yep,
yeah, I
absolutely.
also think that's really important. So I'm really happy that we got that basic understanding of what mental health is and how it should be prioritized, why it should be prioritized, and just why it's so important in general. So I actually now wanted to get into the topic of the fact that today, like in today's day and world, there's so many misconceptions and there's so many stigmas regarding this topic, like regarding mental health and mental illnesses. So I just wanted to come on here and debunk some of them and just talk about them with a real expert so we can go over them.
Let's hear it.
So the first stigma that I wanted to bring up is, so I've heard this a lot. I'm sure many people have heard about this. It's the concept that mental health is, quote, controllable. Like it's something that someone chooses to have or can choose to stop having, like issues that is just up to the person themselves. So first off, how do you feel about this stigma?
Yeah, so definitely heard that one a lot. I would say that is definitely not true because even though, like, people who think this, might be coming at it from like, if I just try a little bit harder, maybe I wouldn't feel this way, or like, even things like, why can't you just get over it? Right. But like those kinds of thoughts, that kind of idea, it just creates a lot of shame and it ignores the complexity of behind like mental health, right? Like there's a lot of struggle with anxiety, depression, trauma responses that aren't just about a bad mood. It's not something you can just snap out of. It's not something that just, oh, it's just one bad day. Like tomorrow is going to be all okay. Like that's not what anxiety and depression are. We can feel anxious and have a sad day. That's different.
Yeah.
But that's really reductive to think of mental health as that way because anxiety is more anxiety, depression, those kinds of things. They're chronic things. They're not something that
Yeah.
you just snap out of, right? So to people who think that, I think it's just important to understand that there is a difference between a sad day and like a bad day that's right off the heels of something that made you anxious versus having anxiety and depression, for example.
Yeah, it's like I like to think of it, like compare it to, some people say that, oh, why do you care so much about mental health when you should be caring about your physical health? And I just like to think of it as like, let's say you tear your ACL, it's going to take you months to recover. So
Mm.
I would say like that same aspect of recovery should be seen for mental health issues and etc. It's not something that you can just choose to get over. You have to give it time to heal, give yourself time to heal and be open to the issue.
Absolutely. I love that analogy. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm really glad we cleared that up. I'm sure many people hear that every day. It's the most common one. I've been hearing it since I was a kid. And so
Mhm.
yeah, just like I just find it so important to note that mental health is just as important as other aspects of your health. And it's not something that just goes away by saying, "Oh, I'm going to get better."
Exactly.
So, our second misconception that I wanted to look at is the idea that it is only a mental health issue or it's only a medical issue if it's clinically diagnosed by a professional. So something like you've gone in, you've gotten it diagnosed. And I just wanted to bring this up because I want to highlight like a lot of people have these types of issues, but they're too scared to go to doctors about it, or they just don't go because of the social stigmas around it, like the social aspects of mental health and like this weird black fog around it that says that it's something super bad. So, how do you feel about this?
Yeah. Well, I gotta say, I really do love the late millennial and like Gen Z kind of belief behind this, the casualness of like, oh, my therapist said. I really love that because it really starts normalizing like
Yeah.
therapy is not something that's really scary. Like it's not a day and age where, if you go to therapy, it's like, oh my God, like is she quote unquote crazy or like what's her like deep problem? It's not like that.
Yeah.
Kind of like what you were saying earlier. Yes, when you go to therapy, you can have a formal diagnosis, but it doesn't always have to be that way. In fact, um, about 50% or more of the clients I see, they don't necessarily have a firm diagnosis of anxiety, depression, or PTSD, or like, those kinds of diagnosis. A lot of the times, what they're wanting to work on is just like communication skills, relationship skills,
Yeah.
work through healing some childhood wounds. And for those things, they don't necessarily have a formal diagnosis, but it's about learning, emotional intelligence, emotional regulation, and just like life skills like relationship skills, communication skills, that kind of stuff. So it's not as scary as it might seem in the beginning, or as what society our culture tends to make it out to be.
Yeah, so like when people say, "Oh, you go to a therapist, oh, you must have like outlying trauma, stuff like that." It's like I like to think of it as, so everyone has mental health. Everyone has health and wellness in their brain and their mental status and etc. But I feel like people tend to forget that your mental health is, it's just as different as your physical health. Like you'll have good days, you'll have bad days, but everyone has had bad days before. No one's gone their entire life without like some anxiety or some like output feelings that they haven't known how to process. And that's just like, people forget that mental health is just, it's something that you should just be taking care of. It's not something that has to be bad for you to fix.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just like with physical health, you don't necessarily want to wait for some kind of physical diagnosis like
Yeah.
diabetes or cholesterol issues for you to start taking care of yourself and eating well and working out and, balancing.
Yeah, because like the most important thing is to just know where you are, like accept what you want, and then try to seek out how to help yourself.
Yeah.
So, yeah, those are my two misconceptions that I wanted to bring up for us to debunk, but there are plenty of other misconceptions that are out there. So, I just wanted to ask you, as a licensed professional counselor, what are some common misconceptions that you encounter in your field of work, and how do you address them with your own clients?
Yeah, that's great. So I'll give it with a little bit of a spin of, since I work with South Asians, I'll kind of focus on the South Asian community and what I've heard. Um, the first thing, I've encountered that is really important to debunk is sometimes I'll have like parents call in who want to schedule something for their children.
Mhm.
And sometimes there's this misconception that as a therapist, I'm going to basically help the parents tell the child what to do and then report back to the parent. And so
Mm.
that's huge. Like, no. I had a parent one time call about it, and I talked to her about like, like I understand like this is a very difficult time, as kids grow up in this very bicultural place. They grow up a little differently than you. They're in a teenager phase. It's difficult to parent. Totally get that. But my role here is to be, helping the client, who would be your child, go
Yeah.
through their journey of mental health. My job is not to be a middleman between, you and the child. And so like that, there's that big misconception of how it might apply to, children.
Yeah.
Another one I got that is actually pretty common too is, the kind of that question of like, well, this isn't necessarily coming from clients, but like other people when I talk to people like just out in the real world, and they kind of say like, well, can I just talk to my friends, or can I just talk to like my mom? Why do I need therapy? Like, why do I need to
Yeah.
pay somebody to just listen to me? Right. And
Mhm.
so, there's a little bit of like unlearning there of like what therapy is and what therapy isn't. Right. So, the therapy space is someone who is completely outside of your life, who does not know you, does not have any kind of vested interest in your life and what happens in your life other than as a therapist and client relationship. So there's less bias, right? Like you wouldn't want
Yeah.
a parent operating like surgery on their own children. That's a big no.
Yeah,
It's
you
kind
want
of the
like
same
the
thing.
neutral.
Yeah. You want someone neutral, someone who isn't gonna, feel anxious and nervous in the moment and like have that fear. You want someone objective, not someone
Yeah.
subjective, essentially.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, those are the two biggest things I see more from like the parents and like South Asian community side of things. Typically, what I see in like the therapy room from clients, I see kind of this bias of, I don't, a little bit of bias, a little bit of fear around, like boundaries, for example, if we talk about like
Yeah.
a specific mental health topic. So boundaries are seen as like very white centric, white culture type of thing of like, oh, just say no. And like people have to respect that. But there's also a lot of nuance that we don't tend to talk about and that a lot of people don't understand because maybe they don't have as much experience with South Asian therapists. But a
Mhm.
culturally informed therapist, right, will take into account like the nuances. It's not just about like just say no and like they have to respect that. Like, yes,
Yeah.
that's one way to do boundaries, but another way to do boundaries that's more appropriate for a cultural setting with different, collectivist culture and like the kind of nuances that come with that it just looks differently. It can still be done. Boundaries are still important, but the way you do it can feel more comfortable, can feel more authentic, can
Mm-hmm.
feel like it's going to be received well rather than, that confusion of what does this know that you're saying? Like, why are you back talking to me? So
Yeah.
I tend to see those kinds of misconceptions about maybe like very like white centric therapy talk and how it might apply to them. And then we talk a lot about like, no, like it doesn't have to look like that. It doesn't have to be that scary. We can talk about how it works for you specifically.
Yeah. Like, I feel like it's really important to remember that I said this in episode 1 a ton of times, but mental health is vastly different for every person, right? Everyone is affected by mental health in their lives, but everyone's affected by it in like different ways. Some people could have certain issues and some people could feel certain ways, but I truly just hope like what like our listeners take away from this is that like the most important part about spreading this kind of information or just spreading the topic of mental health and like awareness regarding it is just make sure that we're all informed. Like misconceptions where it's not based on facts or where it's based on other stuff that's not proven, I honestly think that if you're not fully informed about it, it's probably going to do more harm than good. So I just really wanted to highlight mental health is something that everyone should be aware about. Everyone should know the true meaning about it. And I just truly hope that this session, like clearing up the air of like some common misconceptions, just kind of opened up the window that we don't know everything about mental health, but it's important to understand what we do know.
Yeah, definitely. And what we don't know, like be
Yeah.
curious to it before you kind of jump in and say, this is what is, this is what it's
Yeah.
not. Yeah.
So yeah. So I'm gonna mark it right there because that's another section. And
Nice.
then great. So now let's go on to I wanted to talk about the big question of this podcast. So it's the big question for this episode, but I also think that this is the umbrella question for our whole podcast, our whole series in general. And I wanted to just discuss the unique toll that is placed on people in supportive and caregiving roles. Like how these people who are behind the scenes of diseases and chronic illnesses, how are they affected by mental health? And, so I just wanted to ask, what do you know, like the stigma, and like what do you think about how mental health affects these kinds of people, like people who are supporting others at all times?
Yeah. I really love this question because it's not something that we often, talk about or think about. Usually if someone's struggling, we focus on like them. But the
Mm-hmm.
people who support these individuals, like that's a big role to take on. Caregiving
Yeah.
is such a selfless role a person can take on, but that also means it's probably going to come with a very like big emotional toll, right?
Yeah.
One of like the biggest challenges I find that I think can exist with someone like this is they tend to put their own needs maybe last because they're focused on prioritizing the person that they're supporting. And that can, typically lead to like things like burnout, resentment
Yeah.
sometimes even a loss of identity over time if it's like a really chronic issue, because
Yeah.
you're just so focused for being there for somebody else that it's so easy when you're caregiving to forget about caring for yourself.
Yeah. Cuz like
That's it.
it's yeah. It's so important to like recognize your own mental health as well as others. Like it's like amazing to be able to give your love and give your support and hold the hand for someone who's a victim of these kinds of illnesses and terrible diseases. But I feel like people forget to realize that caregivers, like friends, family, support systems, like they're pushed to their limits sometimes, and people don't really talk about it.
Absolutely. And it's so important, that you're creating that space even to like acknowledge it where that might not even be something that's acknowledged, right?
Yeah,
Another
yeah.
thing that I find is like a really common challenge too with these supportive roles is like guilt.
Hmm.
Guilt is, I think, one of those tricky emotions, right? Whether you
Yeah.
have anything to feel guilty for or not, guilt is sometimes just there. So let's talk about guilt for a second. I think
Hmm.
in these roles, it's easy for somebody to maybe feel guilty for wanting a break, something super normal, but they might feel really
Yeah.
guilty for that. They might feel guilty for like momentary feelings of like frustration, because of the chronic nature of caregiving and like how much of a toll it takes. It's easy to sometimes get frustrated. But that can sometimes feel, it can come with guilt of like, I can't believe I'm feeling frustrated. I'm not the one going
Yeah.
through this, even like not being able to fix everything or like feel like you're making a difference. Sometimes there can be guilt even within that. And I would also say that can sometimes lead to a lot of loneliness in that
Yeah.
case, right? So all of those things that we just talked about, I think all of those things can really compound. And if you're not really careful, that can lead to its own kind of anxiety, depression, hopelessness, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because like prioritizing yourself is also so important, especially like you want to be ready for your best for your friends, your family, whoever you're supporting. And I think it's just really important, like you said, like you need to make space for yourself too. And if you are harboring feelings, how would you tell someone to find help or talk about it or like just try to get like make themselves feel better for the topic?
Yeah. So, I think really the important thing to remember is you're not perfect. You cannot be perfect. Nobody is. So, as you're doing your very loving act of caring for somebody, it's just really important to remember to care for yourself. So, if these things are going to start coming up for you, the first thing to remember is, what would you want if a friend was going through this? You would want
Yeah.
them to have help. You would want them to talk about it with somebody. You would want them to have breaks and ask for help. So those are the things you want to do for yourself as well.
Yeah, like, because you can't help other people before you help yourself, because you need to have both. There has to be a balance of everything. So, yeah, I wanted to come on here. This was like the major part of this episode, because I really just wanted to emphasize how important it is to, like, you have to have that balance, And, like, I wanted to this podcast, like the whole reason I made this podcast is to have this space so that supporters, caregivers, all these people behind the scenes, they also have the space to feel like they matter. Like their mental health matters just as much as victims of these illnesses or the people they're caring for. So, yeah, I just want everyone who's listening to just remember that that's why we're here. We want to create the space for supporting roles cuz everyone's mental health matters cuz it's the best for everyone to be like well aware of how they're dealing with stuff.
Absolutely. And to those that might like think, I think it's easy, when there's like that guilt, it's easy to think, well, there's no time to take care of me. I have to take care of them. It's
Yeah.
so important to remember the saying, you cannot pour from an empty cup, right? So if you're
Mhm.
constantly running on this empty, you're not even going to be able to show up for your loved one the way that you want to anyway. So self
Yeah.
care, it's not selfish, it's not unnecessary, it is absolutely vital that you take time to rest, set your own boundaries, ask for help, and take care of you so that you have the energy to take care of the person you care about.
Yeah, cuz yeah, like we've been saying this like since we started this topic, like both sides of the coin have to be like well, like shiny for the coin to be clean. Or yeah, that's a weird analogy, but yeah, that's exactly how I feel about this topic.
Yeah, I love that.
Okay, so now as we're coming to the end with this, I want to talk about the overview of like not just people in supportive roles, but this is also for my listeners who aren't in supportive roles, but also feel that their mental health isn't being as valued or they feel like they want to do something to improve like self-care, like care about themselves more. So since you are a counselor, I wanted to ask about some common mental health strategies that you would give someone for self care or just boundary setting or finding support that you may need when you need it, you know?
Yeah, I love this question. Basically, a couple of different like strategies, right?
Yeah.
I love it. I think there's a lot of different ways to go about supporting your mental health. Obviously, number one, do therapy. Um,
Yeah.
but in general, things that you can do on your own, like for example, like daily self care. So what that means is nothing like too fancy. Like it's not about like pampering yourself, but even simple things like journaling for 5 minutes, going for a walk, practicing a couple of deep breaths. When you start to feel a little bit like anxious, those are simple things as well as again, right, like mental health, physical health are very related. So like even like make sure you're drinking enough water, eating
Yeah.
consistent meals, like all those daily self-care things also affect our mental health. So those are like basics: enough sleep, good nutrition, good
Yeah.
movement, that kind of stuff. um Other things, like as far as boundaries go, it's not very easy for a lot of people in the South Asian community to do boundaries. It's not really common, but learning how to find ways to set boundaries in a way that feel more comfortable for you and work for you. That doesn't have to mean just saying no. And like, that's it. If that feels really,
Yeah.
really icky, it doesn't have to be that. But even like taking a moment to say something small thing, right? Like, hey, I can't do that thing because I already committed to this other thing, but maybe I can help you at a different time, right? So delaying it, something like that. Non-boundary related stuff like seeking support in other ways, so whether
Yeah.
that's again therapy, just prioritizing time with friends, family, just to kind of talk about things, process things rather than keeping it all bottled up. I think that's always great. We are definitely creatures of communities,
Yeah.
so lean on, whoever you feel safe enough to talk with and get vulnerable and talk to them.
Yeah. Like it's so important to like even like we said, the misconception that you need to have a mental problem to actually be like a diagnosed mental issue to be
Yeah.
discussing or bringing it up, but it really is something that people should just think about every day, because it's your mental wellness is your own mental wellness. Like you live with yourself every single day, so it's great to just take care of yourself like whenever you can.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Even things like creating like a simple routine that you do, whether
Yeah.
that's like a morning routine, a bedtime routine, just simple things like that can help with feelings of like overwhelm, something that your mind, your body like look forward to because they're used to it, like that habit. Those
Yeah.
can feel really good. Um Even things like doing yoga, those kinds of movements, slow movements. Um yeah, really the key is start small and then, build up to it. You don't have to like overhaul your whole life overnight to make it seem like, oh, see, I'm like doing my mental health. But it's
Yeah.
in the little things, making sure your foundation is strong and then working your way up to addressing what comes up. So what I mean by that is big no-no is don't suppress your emotions. If something's coming up, like don't be afraid of it. Just kind of be
Yeah.
curious to it.
Yeah, so like the big thing, just be aware, be open to yourself, allow yourself to improve yourself or just grow and be yourself as a person. Like
Yeah.
we don't ever want to just like shove all our feelings into a bottle. So I think
Yes.
I also agree. It's like it's so important to just express how you're feeling. Like everyone would be happier if we would just say how we feel out loud.
Absolutely. Suppressing our emotions is like a pressure cooker waiting to explode. It's
Yeah.
just, it's going to come out one way or the other. You can do it in a way that you're okay with, or it's going to come out really messy and ugly later on.
Yeah, and I think honestly, as like for all my listeners, like this is important for both. Like this is important for everyone, but it's also important for our support systems, our caregivers. It's important for this applies to everyone. Everyone's affected by mental health, and self-care is something that applies to everyone. No one person is like, "Oh, I don't need self-care. I do this." Like everything you do is for your betterment, and so I think it's just important that these strategies they're for everyone. Use as you please. It'll help you.
Absolutely. Start small and build your way up.
Yeah. So we've come to the end of this episode, but I wanted to like thank you so much, Anusha, for joining us. So do you have any like parting words, final thoughts that you wanted to give on the importance of the awareness, the importance of everyone understanding mental health well before we end this episode?
Yeah, sure. So, I think really at the end of the day, mental health awareness is just so, so crucial because it helps, like your podcast, for example, talking about this, for example, it helps break
Yeah.
down the stigma and it helps normalize mental health. It helps normalize therapy. It helps normalize seeking help for it. And by creating these conversations, we're also just normalizing the struggle behind it. We're helping people feel like they can ask for help, and it doesn't mean that you failed. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It just means that you're human, right? We're just really focused on making mental health as normal as physical health, making going to therapy as normal as getting your annual checkup.
Yeah, because anything you do that can help you is important. So just prioritize that way. Do whatever you
Yeah,
can to make yourself the best version of you.
exactly. At the end of the day, prioritizing your mental health, even your physical health, all of it, just health in general, it's an act of self love.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much for joining me. You've really, it's been amazing to hear your opinions, hear all the expert information that you've given us. I'm so grateful to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Anshu. I'm so excited for your podcast. I'll be
Me
following
too.
along.
Thank you. Now, to my viewers, thank you so much for joining me for today's episode. Be sure to tune in for episode 3 that's coming this March, where we'll be talking about the emotional landscape, burnout, and wisdom that comes with long-term caregiving. If you're looking for any more updates or resources, you can always find me on Instagram at The Unseen Pillars. And I also encourage you to check out our guest mental health platform at Talk South Asian to Me. Until next time, remember, your mental health matters just as much as everyone else's. See you guys soon!